Hey folks, this is Kelani. It looks like there's a good reason why patch 8.1 won't be launching until another month, because every week there's more and more stuff added onto the PTR for us to have a look at. That means more and more stuff for us to sink our teeth into when 8.1 finally rolls around, and remember that release date is slated for December 11th right now. So we should all have plenty to do over Christmas break if you have spare time to hop into Azeroth. But 8.1 won't start off the next season of Battle for Azeroth, which includes the new raid, the new Mythic Plus affixes, new PvP season, and the much anticipated extra ring of Azerite traits on all new Azerite gear. We expected for all of that to come with the next patch 8.1.5 because raids were typically released with the 0.5 patches all throughout Legion. With the dev team wanting to stick to a content cycle similar to Legion, I thought we wouldn't see the raid open until February, maybe even March, but a recent blue post gives us a much sooner release date. It looks like the current plan is to push 8.1 live in early December and open up the Battle of Dazar'alor raid and the rest of the Season 2 changes sometime in January, so we'll only be a month into 8.1 before the new raid drops, which is way sooner than I could have hoped for. Obviously it could open up towards the later half of January and then we'll be in 8.1 for a month and a half, but that's still way better than the 77 days or nearly 3 months that we would have to wait for a typical 0.5 patch based upon the Legion content cycle. So that tells me that this raid probably won't be tied to any specific patch or extra update, and it will just get plonked in whenever the dev team thinks it fits best, which honestly is fantastic. I know a lot of players would love to get their hands on some of the quality of life changes coming in patch 8.1. From the experience changes to the Azerite armor vendor, it just feels like the game is going to be more enjoyable and more worthwhile to actually play when that patch comes around. If we had to wait for 8.1.5 to step into the new raid and that would take 3 months, that problem would just get shifted onto another piece of content. So what else is coming in January? The big new piece of content is obviously the new raid. We'll only have access to the Battle of Dazar'alor though. The Crucible of Storms will come at a much later date. Season 2 of Battle for Azeroth also introduces the extra ring of traits on every new piece of Azerite armor, so we'll have 3 times the spec-specific traits to choose from, which should hopefully open up the system a little bit more and solve a handful of issues that we've been having. As a quick note, seeing as the vendor will allow you to target specific pieces of gear in patch 8.1, you're probably best off saving up all of that currency until Season 2 becomes active sometime in January, so the pieces you buy will have that extra ring. That's definitely something that I'm going to keep in mind as we head into the new year. We'll also say goodbye to the Infested affix on Mythic Plus keys above 10, and that will be replaced by Reaping. We're not entirely sure what Reaping does yet. From what little we know, instead of being an affix that affects you or the mobs themselves, Reaping will trigger after you kill a certain amount of trash. That gives you a lot of control over this affix, which is definitely something new, and you can actively decide when to deal with it. When you trigger Reaping, every monster that you've killed in the dungeon so far will be resurrected and will actively pursue you. We're not sure if they have less health or you just need to avoid them for a certain amount of time or how that's going to work. It will, however, be available on the PTR to test in the coming weeks, so I'll be sure to get the skinny on the specifics whenever I can. It sounds like it's going to be very different when compared to Infested. Then I believe the next PvP season will also accompany everything else, so if you want to get the Season 1 rewards, then you only have until sometime in January to do so. So besides the release date of the next raid, what else do we have to talk about? Well, remember how I said patch 8.1 still isn't finished on the PTR? Yeah, they're still adding quite a few changes here and there, including some new spell animations, new trinket animations and effects, and they finally updated the Darkshore zone to reflect its new status as a warfront. Let's start with the new spell animations because that's always exciting. All of these are for paladins. Once again, very recently we looked at a new consecration animation which looks pretty awesome, but they didn't stop there. We also have a new animation tied to some blessings. Blessing of Freedom and Blessing of Protection now have a cool little Libram casting animation. I don't think the effect itself has changed, the swirl on the floor for freedom and the crown above your head for protection, just the initial cast animation has changed to show that little Libram pop out of nowhere and disappear just as quickly. It's a nice animation, it's just a shame it doesn't really last for very long because these two spells are instant cast. Thankfully, a few other spells make use of the Holy Libram, including Holy Light, where you get to see the Libram for quite a bit longer. There's even a little page turning part of the animation and plenty of light effects thrown around too. I'm so happy that the Libram is finally part of the Paladin's casting animations. The Burning Crusade cinematic with the Draenei Paladin flipping through his Holy Tome to find the right seal or blessing was epic, and one of the reasons I actually played a Draenei Paladin throughout most of TBC. There's a handful of other animation changes to the various beacons that Holy Paladins have access to as well. All of the beacons look pretty much the same when applied now, and there's a persistent holy glow above the target's head. So if you beacon yourself, you'll be running around with this holy glow above you the entire time. If you take the double beacon and you have one in each tank, you shouldn't ever lose track of them again. And if you decide to take Beacon of Faith, it does the same thing except to 5 targets all at once. I like that new animations and spell effects are making their way into the game, but I'm really torn about a persistent effect for an ability that doesn't have a duration. Those beacons will stay there all night long during raid progression or throughout an entire dungeon. I think it's really cool, but I can see a lot of people getting tired of it very quickly. What do you think? A little too flashy and annoying, or the perfect amount of holy light? I also mentioned trinket effects and animations because it's pretty typical that the day after I make a video talking about the new trinkets coming in Battle of Dazar'alor, the dev team decides to put all of those trinkets on a vendor for us to test on the PTR. Hilarious, I'm laughing my socks off right now. That video could have been so much more entertaining if I could show off some shiny effects, but never mind. Most of the interesting effects are tied to the AoE trinkets, so let's have a little peek at what we're dealing with. Quite a few trinkets are passive, so we'll just go through the ones which actually have effects tied to them. One of the most interesting trinkets for me was Grong's Primal Rage, mainly because this kind of effect has been seen before and it was incredibly powerful. Using this trinket causes you to pound the ground around you for 4 seconds, which looks a bit tame compared to a real Primal Rage you see from our good friend Winston, but I'll take it. I was also interested in whether this could be stacked with damage increasing cooldowns, and it would seem the various commenters who told me that trinkets don't work that way anymore are correct. Using cooldowns like Avenging Wrath won't increase the damage of this trinket, so if it's pants on its own, it's just going to be pants overall. The other thing I wanted to test was how much extra damage you deal when you hit multiple targets, because while all of these trinkets still split their damage amongst the targets you hit, they also deal more damage if you hit more targets. On a single target, this trinket does about 10k damage per tick, and against 4 targets it deals 3.6k damage per target per tick, so you go from 10k per tick to 14.4k per tick. That's a pretty decent increase from 1 target to 4. Let's have a look at some of the other trinkets. Invocation of Yulon calls upon an old friend to crash into our enemies, dealing AoE damage to everything near your target. This actually calls up a small jade cloud serpent that does a little thrash in the air. It's a really pretty effect. That one is for the agility DPS users. The Intellect AoE trinket is the Tidestorm Codex. This effect summons up several Tide elementals that crash into your target, dealing damage to everything nearby. This effect is actually channeled, so you need to make sure you can stand still for just a little bit to get all of those elementals summoned. They do their damage pretty quickly too, so this should be great for burst AoE. I'm definitely looking forward to picking up some of these trinkets to use in Mythic Plus, even if the raid doesn't give us many AoE opportunities. There is a healing trinket with an AoE effect as well. This one applies a shield to up to 5 allies that you hit with a targeting circle, and they all share the same absorb amount. So this might not be quite as strong as I initially thought, but it has a shiny little bubble effect while the shield persists. Those are the most interesting effects on offer from this round of trinkets, but if you want to play around with them yourself, you can buy them all very easily from the Flascator vendor on the PTR. All of the other trinkets are passives or have no real effects. And then the last thing I wanted to touch on briefly in this video is Darkshore. It's finally been updated to include a max level version of the zone. Now it will be fighting in another warfront. Quite a few things have changed. The Horde has blasted Lord Danel to Kingdom Come with some of their lovely blight, so there goes another Night Elf camp. On the flip side, it looks like parts of Orbadine have been rebuilt, including the pier or docks or whatever you want to call it. That looks quite nice, and there's even some Alliance and Horde ships chilling out next to each other, which is probably a phasing issue, but never mind. This warfront term will have more world quests for you to complete, including another world boss, so you should have more reasons to come back to Darkshore every day, whereas Arathi Highlands is more of a bi-weekly deal where you get a bunch of quests, but as soon as you've done them all, there's no real reason to go back, at least until it cycles around, so we'll see how that plays out. There's also a whole bunch of rares for you to take on in Darkshore, which will drop some gear and hopefully a few new mounts or toys, just like Arathi. Teldrassil also seems to have burned out at this point, so it's just a smouldering husk looming in the background. I wonder where the story will take us from here. Is that it for Teldrassil, or will we see some form of rejuvenation? I'm excited to find out. But that's it for this video. Did you think we would see the next raid tier this early? What do you think about the Darkshore warfront so far? Leave all your thoughts in the comment section below. A big thank you to all of our supporters over on Patreon. You can see their names floating by on the screen. If you want to join these lovely guys and gals, you can find a link in the description below. Remember to leave a like just below the video before you leave, and if you want to see more, make sure to subscribe. But apart from that, thanks for watching folks, good luck and have fun, and as always I will see you next time.